You're listening to Straight from the Drafts. I'm your host Nao, social media strategist, business cheerleader and chronic oversharer. In this weekly voice note from me, you can expect actionable insights and behind the scenes stories, my best tips and all the encouragement, all with the goal of helping you plan your content with confidence so that you can turn your goals into reality with the support from your social media. So grab a drink, pop in your headphones and let's get into this week's episode. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Straight from the Drafts. This is a little milestone episode because this is episode 10, so we are officially into the double digits. And whether you have tuned in, maybe this is the first time you're tuning in, or you have listened to every single one of those 10 episodes or somewhere in between, thank you so much for being here and for listening along. I would absolutely love it if you let me know if you've enjoyed this episode, what you think about it afterwards, if you've been listening to other episodes, if you've had a favourite. I really enjoy hearing your feedback and honestly I don't get enough of it. I can see nearly 200 downloads in the stats in the back end for the first 9 episodes, and I've only spoken to a few of you about the podcast, so I genuinely really love hearing your thoughts, your feelings, and being able to create episodes that you enjoy listening to. So if there's anything in particular that you want to hear or the kind of topics that you enjoy hearing about, then please let me know, because I can guarantee it will directly impact the episodes that I put out. So today's episode is going to be a bit of a debrief about an event that I went to last week called Confidence Live. And one of my clients basically said that the event looked amazing and can I send her a voice note podcast about the day to debrief and, share my favourite quotes from the day, things I've learned. And I just thought, well, why don't I do that on the actual podcast and then everyone can hear it? So this episode is for her, but also I know that there will be lots for everyone to take away. This event was not aimed at business owners, which I actually really enjoyed, and I'll get into that in a second. But it was a general event around confidence, about being your most authentic self, people pleasing, joy. So many topics were covered, but there were people in the room from all sorts of careers, not just business owners. In fact, I think business owners were probably in the minority. So lots of takeaways, whether you have a full-time corporate role, you're side hustling, or you are a full-time business owner. I will also say before we jump into the episode that this one is going to be a little bit scrappy. I have literally got my notebook in front of me that I took to the event and the little scribbles that I made of quotes or thoughts that I had throughout the day. And I'm basically just going to be going through those notes and sharing them with you. I don't have a huge plan, so we're just going to recap the day together. If that sounds good, then get yourself comfy and let's get into it. Okay, so let's start with making the decision to go to Confidence Live. So I'd actually heard of it for the first time last year because 2 of my small business pals were speaking at it last year, but I kind of heard about it a bit too late and I couldn't sort of make it work to go along and watch them do their thing. However, one of those, Ellie, shout out Ellen and Molly, Ellie spoke again this year, and another one of my small business friends and clients wanted to go along as well. So we'd kind of been umming and ahhing about it, talking about, are we going to go, since literally January. And it wasn't until Ellie was arranging for her mum to go along as one of her guests that kind of gave us the kick to actually book our ticket and go along. So it was a really lovely day because not only did we get to listen to all these amazing speakers, Ellie included, it meant that we could go and cheer on our friend and see her do her thing and be fabulous at it, I also got to catch up with that client and friend. There were other small business owners there, one who I'd actually been following online for a while, another who I kind of have now come across just because of this day. So it was really lovely. It was a great excuse to kind of meet new people, catch up with people I haven't seen for a little while. And yeah, it was just a nice event. And I think it came a couple of weeks after Atomicon, which I didn't go along to, but a lot of people that I follow online had done. And I think, to be honest, that's the element that I was really, envious feels too strong because that makes it sound bitter, but that's where I had the FOMO, because people were catching up with other people in the small business world, friends, clients, just people that they kind of knew of, and really networking. And I love networking. I've talked about this before in an episode. Networking is so life-changing, not just like game-changing for the business, but personally as well, to be able to make new friends and connections and learn from people, get inspired by people. And yeah, this just kind of felt like that, maybe on a bit of a smaller scale, because I spent the day probably with a group of 4 or 5 small business owners, whereas I feel like Atomicon, there's literally hundreds of people there and you're trying to see everyone. But I really enjoyed that element of it. Another thing that I will say, actually, while I'm on the topic of spending the day with small business owners, I kind of mentioned in the intro that this event was not aimed towards small business owners, and it wasn't aimed towards entrepreneurs, agencies, online businesses. It was aimed at humans generally. And that's something that I didn't even really appreciate going into it would make a difference at all. But by the time we went off for our lunch break, I realised how refreshing that was. Being in the online business space, following other online business owners, kind of always being in that business world, it can sometimes be a little bit draining. I don't know if that's the right word, but it's definitely a bubble where you can get really caught up in that space and not necessarily just think about everything from a human level, a day-to-day perspective. Everything comes from a lens of either being a business owner or speaking to other business owners. And actually, having all these speakers who have a whole range of careers, many of whom were entrepreneurs, but maybe that was a byproduct of another career or that had come later in life, and being surrounded by these other wonderful people who were just soaking up the atmosphere and learning, but taking that learning away on a human level, not in a I'm going to make my business better off the back of this kind of way. It was so refreshing, and I enjoyed that aspect of it way more than I could have anticipated. It's not even something that I even thought about when I booked my ticket, but having experienced it, I realised that that's something that I need to make more of an effort to do. And that's maybe not just with the events that I go to, but the podcasts that I listen to, or other kind of like personal development things that I can be doing. Maybe it's the books that I read, taking it back to just a human level and being there and working on myself as Nao, and not necessarily as Nao the business owner or Nao the CEO or founder. And it was a really unexpected thing from the day, so I just wanted to share that with you because it's something I didn't know I needed. So if you are a business owner listening to this, maybe it's something to think about and reflect on, and kind of notice when you have spent a lot of time with other business owners, or you've spent a lot of time with people who aren't business owners. Take note of what your energy feels like, and actually if it feels refreshing to not be with business owners or not be talking about business related things all of the time, maybe that's your sign to take it back to a human level as well. The event opened with a talk from the founder, Kirsty, and her topic was all about joy. Her speech was all about joy, and she shared a lot during her opening talk. It was quite vulnerable, it was funny, it was fantastic. It was a perfect opening speech, and I can't lie, made me a bit emotional. And it wasn't the last time that I got emotional throughout the day, but one of the quotes that really stuck with me and I wrote down, and I've actually sent it to one of my family members since then, so it makes me feel a bit emotional reading it out. But one of my favourite quotes of the whole day was actually in the first 10 minutes, so I thought I would share that one with you, and that is, joy is not a reward for getting through hard stuff, it's the method for getting through it. And I just absolutely friggin' love that. Joy being a method for getting through hard times, whatever that is, allowing yourself to still find the moments of joy, and not even just allowing yourself, but almost encouraging it and proactively looking for the joy will help you to get through the hard times. And then also, after the hard times, making sure that you try not to sit in that victim mindset. And one of the things that Kirsty said, which I would like to sort of reiterate here, is this isn't about toxic positivity. You're allowed to say, this is shit. You're allowed to call crappy stuff. I do think it's really important, if someone's going through a hard time, not to just kind of reassure them that everything's going to be okay and try to remain positive, but actually just kind of saying to that person, that is really shit and I'm really sorry, can be one of the most helpful things that you can do as a friend. So yeah, I just want to point that out at this stage. But she also then shared a quote by Dr. Edith Eger. I might be saying that name wrong, E-G-E-R, Eger. And that quote was, don't ask why me, ask what now. You survived, now live, play. Joy is the invitation to keep going. And I think that's a really good quote around, if you're going through hard times, what can you then do with that? And maybe it's not turning that pain into a story or into a career, but maybe it's using that pain as motivation to find joy and to move on. So I really liked both of those things, using joy as a method for getting through tough times, and also then, instead of sitting in the victim mindset, asking yourself, what now? And go and live your life. And that was just in the first 10 minutes, guys. Another section, and I didn't write down which speaker this came from, so that's very helpful of me, but this was all around achieving goals. Maybe this was Dr. Nicola? I'm going to have to go and find the speaker list from the day and try and remember. But I have written down the sort of key to achieving your goals, and that is 3 questions. So you can ask yourself, what's my ideal? What do I ideally want to achieve? What's my fallback? So plan B, if I don't achieve my ideal scenario, what's my fallback plan? And third, what is my bare minimum? And this just helps you to try and work towards your goals, even if it's not perfect, even if it's not your ideal. You've got the fallback, and then you've got sort of the fallback to your fallback. You've got the bare minimum. And she also said, this was definitely Dr. Nicola. I need to find her full name. I will put it in the description. She also pointed out that you can't compare yourself not just to other people, but to the old version of you. You know, if you were capable of running a half marathon 10 years ago, that's not to say you should be capable of doing it now, and you shouldn't beat yourself up about not being able to do now what you have been able to do in the past. That might be 2 weeks ago you, it might be 2 years ago you, 20 years ago you. But I really liked both of those things, and they're things that I wrote down. The achieving goals thing in particular is really helpful, and I think that's something that I really resonated with. So what's my ideal? Even if you think about, I want to do 10,000 steps a day, but right now you're barely leaving the house and maybe struggling to hit 1,000 steps a day, then your ideal might be hitting 10,000 steps a day. Your fallback might be 5,000 steps, but your bare minimum might just be walking out your front door and walking up to the next lamppost, and at least you've got that 60 seconds of fresh air. That might be your bare minimum, but it's still a step towards the end goal, and it's building that habit. The next thing I wrote down, I did write down the speaker. Well done me. So this was Kyra Matthews, and she's on socials as Kyra the Bold. Kyra is spelled Kira, Kyra the Bold. And I wrote down 3 quotes from her. The first was, know what you want and have the audacity to ask for it. And her energy was amazing. She was so passionate. She was so enthusiastic. She just had really high energy, and I really loved listening to her speak and watching her on stage. And this was all about getting people to say yes and going after the things you want. So if you want to achieve things, or if you want to get people to say yes, there's 2 things that you must do, and that's know what you want and have the audacity to ask for it. And she followed this up with a couple of other points, which I wrote down. So if the person that you ask says no, maybe you're just asking the wrong person. It doesn't mean that it's a bad idea. And this is such a helpful reminder. You don't have to take it personally. Maybe you're just asking the wrong person. Maybe they don't think it's possible because of a limiting belief that they have themselves, but that doesn't mean it's not possible for you. And the third thing that I wrote down, which I'll share, is actually the kind of key takeaway that I took from Kyra's talk, and it's one that we kind of discussed over lunchtime when we ended up having Tesco meal deals, all cracking meal deal choices, I will say. And over our meal deals, we were all discussing this particular quote. And Kyra said, sometimes when you ask for something, you have to hold the belief for both parties. Silence is not rejection. Keep asking. And I really, really loved this idea of holding the belief for both parties. So at first, if you ask someone for help with something, or you ask for feedback, they might not be as enthusiastic as you. They might not see the vision, but that doesn't mean that you should immediately give up on that vision, on that dream. And you have to hold that belief for both of you that it's worth investing in, that it's worth saying yes to, it's worth trusting in. And I really love that idea, because it is scary when you ask for someone else's feedback, input, help. Asking for someone else's help is quite scary. I think so many of us are wired to want to do everything ourselves, but it's really trusting in your ideas and your abilities that will convince someone else to believe in them too. And I'm sure there's plenty of people who will say, like, you shouldn't have to convince someone, like, if it's right, they will believe in you straight away. But I don't think that is always the case. And I think that's a really helpful mindset to have, is silence is not rejection. And she was telling a story of a brand that she really wanted to work with. And I can't remember whether it was 6 or 9 months. I didn't write this bit down, but she was literally emailing them for like 6 or 9 months. It was a really long time, and she was emailing them. And she said on the email thread, it literally looked like she was talking to herself, because she just didn't give up on it, and she really loved that brand. And eventually they made it work. Eventually they worked together on this project. So yeah, sometimes it is just about having the audacity and believing in something enough that if someone else says no, it doesn't take away your belief in that thing. The next thing that I've got scribbled down comes in 2 parts. So I actually wrote down a quote from this next talk, and then on the next page, I kind of wrote down reflections or some things that it maybe like triggered for me, which is potentially interesting. So the quote that I wrote down from this speaker, and this was Katie Powell, and I believe she runs a PR firm. I want to say Bottled Imagination. I definitely got that wrong, but it was a cool name. Again, I will add it to the description. And I wrote down 2 things, which I'm pretty sure are not connected. I think they're 2 separate quotes, but I wrote them, literally just scribbled them back to back. So the first one is, just make a fucking decision, which clearly I was resonating with. And the second, which I can remember the context more for was, if in doubt, ask yourself, who am I doing this for? And this talk was all around people pleasing. And one of the people I was sat with, one of my clients actually, really resonated with this talk and really enjoyed this talk. And yeah, it was just this idea of being a people pleaser and how it's okay to, she used the phrase like, it's okay to be a dick occasionally. And she didn't mean, like going out of your way to make someone feel terrible or, intentionally being a dick, but what you might see as being a dick, not going to an event that you feel really busy and overwhelmed, and the idea of going is stressing you out, but you don't want to let people down by not going. Don't go to the event. It's okay. It's okay to be a dick in that scenario. You're not really being a dick. You're just looking after yourself. I think that was more the point, is it's okay to prioritize yourself. So if in doubt, ask yourself, who am I doing this for? And that was a really good talk. But what I actually wrote down on the next page was, if the founder of a PR firm can deliver a talk about people pleasing, why not you? And this is actually kind of coming up for me a lot this year. I'm thinking about the topics that interest me and the things that I like to talk about, and I guess the gifts that I feel like I potentially have, the skills that I have outside of social media management. And part of the reason for wanting to do this podcast was to challenge myself to actually share my expertise and opinions and help to, I guess, educate people around social media, content, strategy. But in these 10 episodes, I've found myself leaning a lot more towards mindset, whether that is generally or specifically as a business owner, sharing my story. And I know that is maybe a comfort blanket. That is where I feel more safe in a way, even though maybe that's a bit more vulnerable to kind of share behind the scenes and stories from throughout my career. But also I think it's something that I do keep coming back to, of those are topics that really light me up and I really enjoy talking about them. They come really naturally to me. And that's not to say that I don't enjoy talking about social media, but I think having been through mindset struggles and seeing that real transformation for myself, I always feel really fired up when I talk about those topics. And I can't lie, it is something that I would be interested in talking about more. It's a balance that I'm trying to figure out right now between talking about business, behind the scenes of the business, and the NEO part of Social by NEO, as opposed to the more social side of things, social media, content, strategy, tips. And I think I've definitely been feeling like I have to choose. But hearing Katie deliver that talk definitely was like a little light bulb moment in, maybe I don't have to choose. Maybe I can do both. Maybe there is a world in which I can be an expert in Instagram and content and social media strategy. And I can also talk about mindset and inspire people with my stories. So that one was particularly interesting and really got me thinking in a way that I didn't quite expect. One of the sessions, this was with Grace Campbell, and if you don't know who she is, I've actually followed her for a while on social media, so I was very excited about this. She's a stand-up comic, she's a writer, she does all sorts of things. And yeah, this session there were a couple of pre-planned questions, but it was largely questions from the audience. My question to her was, what is one piece of advice that someone's ever given you, or a piece of advice that you hear a lot that gives you the ick? But the thing that really struck me from Grace's talk was there was someone there who was asking people what's something that they're good at and trying to like give themselves a compliment. And she asked Grace to do the same. And she complimented herself on being a really good friend and how she shows up for her friends. She's loyal. She's her friends' biggest cheerleaders. And I loved that. And to be honest, when she said that, it's something that I really resonated with. And I think it's so interesting because I do struggle to acknowledge my own talents, skills, and all that kind of thing. But one thing that I don't feel uncomfortable saying is that I'm a good friend. And it was quite clear from other things that Grace was sharing that, you know, she doesn't always compliment herself and she still suffers from imposter syndrome despite, having this outward success, she still doesn't always necessarily recognise that herself or feels uncomfortable accepting a compliment. And yeah, it was just so interesting to kind of see someone who I'm so in awe of say those very similar words and kind of articulate things that I have felt. So that was really interesting. And off the back of that, another thing that she shared, and I can't remember the exact question that led to this response, but she was saying that being surrounded by good people was what has helped her in her career and helped her try out all different things, because she's surrounded by friends who make her believe that it's possible and believe that she's capable of it. And again, it's something that I feel like I talk about quite a lot, is the impact of being surrounded by good people, positive people, cheerleaders, and the impact of having a really solid network. And I didn't actually write anything down from Grace's talk. That was just off the top of my head because I was just so in awe when she was speaking. So I'm sure I've missed some absolute gems, but that definitely really stood out to me as something to think about, the impact of the people around you and their belief in you, and not necessarily as well just their belief in you, but also how they make you feel about yourself, if they make you feel like you are capable. And I really freaking loved that. And I think it was a theme that came up a few times throughout the day, but in Grace's Q&A definitely was really highlighted. Finally, the final quote that I wrote down, and there were so many amazing speakers that I've not written things down from, but I will end on this one. And this is a line, and I probably haven't actually written it word for word, but this was a line from a poem by Desiree, and she was an incredible poet. They did a couple of sections throughout the day and really, really impactful poetry. So if you are into poetry, then definitely recommend checking them out. And again, I will add all of the social handles for each of these speakers that I've mentioned into the comments. But the line that I wrote down was, "Sis, they are intimidated by you. You are not intimidating." And it's just such a powerful perspective shift. And I think it's also good to think about it the other way around as well. If there is anyone that you feel intimidated by, that does not necessarily mean that they are an intimidating person. It may do, but is it actually that you are just intimidated by their success, by their presence, whatever it may be? I have actually worked with a mentor this time last year. Over the summer last year, I worked with a coach, and it was someone that I was intimidated by. And actually what I realised when I was saying that I was intimidated by them, what I actually felt was awe. And I was in awe of them. And I looked up to them and I felt like I could never be them. So when I heard that line in the poem, I wrote it down, because I think it's important not to worry about intimidating other people if what is actually happening is they are intimidated by you, particularly if what they're actually feeling is they're in awe. And that is everything that I've scribbled down from the day. There are probably other key takeaways where as soon as I hit stop on this recording, I am going to sit and remember 5 other things that I should have shared with you from the day. But it was just so gorgeous. It really was. And the speakers were all incredible. The format of the day was perfect. The individual talks were probably no more than 10 minutes each. It was broken up by incredible hosts who got the perfect balance of humour and kind of the seriousness of the day at the same time. The hosts were fantastic. As a side note, I doubt they will ever hear this, but if you are listening, Kieran and Pixie, you are fantastic and you really, really added to the day. And if this event runs again next year, I highly recommend going along. It was in Stoke-on-Trent, which is really easy to get to on the train. I actually drove up because it's only about an hour away from me, but I had a really, really lovely day, meeting new people, hearing different perspectives, and ending the day doing group karaoke with about 300 other people in the room of Bohemian Rhapsody, led by drag queen Pixie. I've never been to an event like it, and I'm so grateful that after all of the conversations back and forth since January, me and my client ended up going along and not only getting to see Ellie absolutely smash it, and I haven't even shouted out anything that Ellie said, but her speech was absolutely brilliant. But yeah, I will again tag the social channels for this event in the description, so if you do want to go and take a look at it, you can do. There is also a little wrap-up reel on my Instagram so you can see what to expect from the day. And yeah, I hope that gave you a few things to think about and insight into the day. And as always, if you enjoyed this episode, please do let me know and make sure you are subscribed so that you never miss an episode. But I will speak to you again next Wednesday for Waffle Wednesday over here on the podcast. And if there is anything in particular you would like to hear, then drop me a message. But until then, I hope you have a gorgeous rest of your week. Bye.